you big dumb idiot. Looks like you got yourself a saucy hand.
Yeah, I do.
Try yourself a Picasso boneless wing. Maybe next time.
Well,
Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Folks, welcome into another edition of the Crowd Assist podcast. I'm one of your hosts today, Kevin Masseri, here with co-host Mike Bunt and Tyson from Let's Talk Jets Radio. He's a fan of the show. He's been on here many, many times, double dipping for a couple of years now. And we love these week 18 now matchups with the Jets. Usually it's week 1, week 18, week 17. Now we have these end of the season games. We joked about it, Tyson, where it was like, this game might matter somewhere, and it does actually matter. They flexed it to 425. There's going to be more time for drinking, more time to those parties that you just saw in the intro. The show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza and Outlet Liquors. What's your outlet? Ty, just first and foremost, how you feeling right now? We talked in November. How'd everything go over the last 60 days? Just give us a riff of just your opinions, because we got some of your loyal followers in here too, so we want to make sure they're up to tune with what you have to
relentless.
say.
Well, Happy New Year's to you both. First of all, thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate it, man. It's been a wild and wacky year, man. And I'm glad the game means something. It's kind of at least something to root for. Maybe you'll inspire the Jets, but this has been a roller coaster ride for the team, man. Like, they've had, some really low moments, a lot of injuries, outbreak of COVID. And then now Zach's kind of bouncing back. The coach is bouncing back, and they had a really exciting game last week. So they're ending on a kind of a high note and kind of a lost season. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And, you got some early comments on it. We talked about this offline. No hate for Bills fans. We know pain. Look, I saw, is this true? Maybe you don't know about the Jets fan or Jets and Giants fan that's suing New York for not being New York.
They must be bored, man.
Did you see that?
They were suing for all kinds of things. It's ridiculous, man.
Oh my God. Your poor media, man. I don't know how you deal with that. So you're dealing with lawsuits of fans and think they're getting scammed, losing football, which we know for 17 years, as Trav just mentioned for us.
But it's funny though. It's for a long time the Jet fans were the complainers, or the whiny complainers, always the unruly people. Now the Giants have sucked for a decade. Now the Giant fans are starting to sue and complain because their PSLs are expensive too, man. Tickets aren't cheap anymore. Between tickets, beer prices, parking's $50. And you put out a bad product for a decade, people start getting pissed. And you got, in a pandemic, you're nothing but time on your hands. So they're finding ways to sue people, complain, and it's just like, just win football games, man. This all goes away.
Yeah. And let's look at the game. Let's talk about it from the top. We half joked about this game mattering. The Bills would have liked to have been more in the Bengals situation, to where maybe you're playing for a seed, maybe you're not, but it's not ideal that they still have to win this football game. So you're probably going to see some real plays. You're going to see, the Bills running and, their real offense. We'll have to check the weather to see how that looked. Ty, I don't know if you followed it all. The games in Western New York have been horrendous. Yeah. The Bills have played super well on the road, taking Tampa to the wire, beating Kansas City, just dominating on the road, dominating the Dome in New Orleans, just dominating these road games. And just they come home to 40-mile-an-hour sideways wind, to sideways snow, to rain against Indy, where no one could throw the ball. It's even worse than the snow. It's been some awful, awful weather here. It's generally, this is what we get our notoriety for, but we haven't quite had a season like this in many, many years. So we'll see how that looks on Sunday here for this flexed game. And obviously we'll be watching the Patriots and the Dolphins a little bit. It doesn't really matter for the Bills too much unless they lose. But we're going to start there at the top. Saw a little bit out of the Jets last weekend, balling against Tampa, making Antonio Brown quit. Let's talk about that for just a quick minute. What's your opinion of that game? Zach Wilson's 100-yard run. Let's hear about it.
Well, they went to the game huge underdogs like this week, and we expected nothing out of them because they had so many injuries. Top 3 receivers are out. The center was out. They have no tight ends. They're all banged up, man. Quentin Williams didn't play because of COVID. So I'm like, just get Zach Wilson out of game healthy. I expect him to get blown out, man. It's just, just survive. And they come out in the first half, and you're like, wow, like they played on offense and defense. They both played really well. Zach Wilson looked composed. Like all the criticisms about Zach Wilson going into the game, he pretty much offset all of them because he did pretty much everything there. You know, he looked very composed, took the easy reads, didn't have the yips, got his screen passes, and he made some wow throws, some like pinpoint precision, small window throws where you're like, what is going on here? And even the defense was making plays. So you're completely shocked by that. They played, I'd say, 3 quarters of good football. Fourth quarter to go into it, and that's when the inexperience of a young team came into it, where like you're playing a very good team with something on the line here. How do you make adjustments? How do you handle that pressure, that environment where, you know, the anxiety goes up, all that? On offense, they struggled a little bit. The defense, they struggled. The Jets had a great drive on offense down to we all know about this now, whatever it was, a 7-yard, 3-yard, or whatever, 3-yard line, 7-yard line. And they choked on 4th and 2. But then the defense also gave a 93-yard drive, and they lost the game to Tom Brady. But
is that the play Rob Ryan's talking about here? So talk to me about.
Yeah, we'll get it. So what happened was it was 4th and 2, and you know we thought at this point Braxton Berrios was having a game of his life. They have a lot of Zach Wilson's very mobile. He's very athletic. You can run him, you can roll him out, you can do all kinds of things. You have Austin Walter, you have Braxton Berrios, you have all these speed guys. So we all thought the same thing. There's no way you're going to do a quarterback sneak. It's 4th and 2. You're going to do something fancy here, just because they do a lot of motion in their offense. Lo and behold, play comes in, they do a quarterback sneak, and they don't get it. And we're like, what in the hell was that? So after the game, Saleh says that it was a communication issue with the coaching staff. They wanted to have an end around. If you look at the play, watch the replay, they had Braxton Berrios in motion. If they would have given him the ball, he would have gotten the first down, the game would have been over. But that didn't happen. So Saleh said, we didn't do a good enough job of communicating. That's what happened. So the Jets SNY postgame show, which is completely ridiculous because it's a show that's sponsored by the Jets, they start calling Zach Wilson a selfish player. They think he called his own number and wanted to be the hero of the game, and it was all about him and not about the team and everything else. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, in my personal opinion, like this moment was, this kid is still trying to figure out the playbook. He's probably swimming right now where they call a play in his ear, he's running it. He's not thinking about how do I become a hero in this game. So there was 3 analysts that are former Jets that just absolutely destroyed Zach Wilson. They called him like a jerk and all these different things, like all like personal attacks. Yep. So which to me was over the top. I guess they're chasing viewers because they probably have none at this point. And that was the biggest story coming out of the game. Meanwhile, this was his best game as a pro. I mean, dude, I'm critical, dude. You know how I am, man. Yep, and I'm like, dude, you walk out of this game, you're questioning his character after all the things this kid's overcome this season, from injuries to poor plays to Josh Johnson coming in playing better, Mike White played better. Like he overcame so many things, and he played this well without his 3 top receivers, a new center, no tight end. I'm like, come on. Like the criticism of Zach Wilson this game, it was like the media, those guys had a narrative. They had some kind of agenda that they're trying to do. They're trying to push some kind of story here. There's nothing there. So yeah, it's unfortunate, man.
Yeah, I thought that was a joke, the narrative that came away from that game. Like you said, that was one of his best games as a pro against the defending champs, in a position to win it. And honestly, just a few misfortunate plays going against the Jets ended up being what led to the loss. I don't know how the media chooses that game to attack Zach Wilson. And going back to that 4th and 2 play, I tend to believe Saleh there, because he did have the first down. If they get it off to him.
It was off a timeout too, man. Which makes it even worse. Like in your timeout, you tell the kid in the headset, you tell him in the helmet, listen, man, hand the ball off. This is the play, but the goal is you get the ball, you do not hold on to it. Like but this is a young coaching staff, man. First time head coach, first time coordinator, a rookie quarterback. And this is the first time they were in this environment where it was like against a great team in a big spot, big moment, like the crowd's into it. Like they're all going to learn from it, but to take away these personal attacks, dude, it's amateur hour stuff, dude. It's completely unnecessary.
Yeah. And how does that help anybody in this situation? You're just bringing negativity for the sake of it. Yep. And even with that failed 4th down, the defense still had plenty of opportunities to get a stop. Yep. And if it's not for Brady, how many quarterbacks actually pull off that type of comeback? That was just magical Brady. And that happens.
I mean, I think it's, but I mean, sorry to cut you off, but I think it's magical Brady. I also think it's a very conservative, scared to lose kind of defense too, where they had a 4-man rush. They got absolutely no pressure on Brady. Where earlier in the game, I think they blitzed 3 or 4 times. Every time they blitzed, they got to him. At least send somebody, make him uncomfortable, get him off his spot. Don't let him be flat-footed and just pick you apart. Like you guys know how many times you've seen Brady do this. We've seen it.
More
to
us than they did the Jets, probably.
Right, and it's like you're sitting there, and I'm like, how many times have we seen this before? Like seriously, like the cynic Jet fan came. I'm like, here we go again. Like this, and like for solid, and that's why the story of the 4th and 2. Yes, it was pivotal. You get the 2 yards, you get a first down, the game's over. Also, they had no timeouts left. They marched the field 93 yards and scored a touchdown.
That was impressive.
Somebody make a play. You have all these guys. Somebody make a play.
We just saw it. Brady gets a call in overtime, a very questionable pass interference on Levi Wallace, pretty well regarded as just a terrible call. On top of the play prior on 3rd down, Stephon Diggs not getting a call that was worse. It was mayhem here. We understand, and then Brady throws a touchdown, to Brashad Perryman. It was
our friend.
It was just it's just insane in overtime after the Bills just absolutely dominated him in the second half. But that team's so much different without Godwin. I mean, some of those weapons. I mean, Leonard Fournette, like they're vulnerable, and the Jets put some stuff out there that shows that, like, hey, if they didn't help themselves, the Jets, they help playoff teams. Figure something out against a Brady team with a receiver quitting, injuries, so many issues on that team right now, and I just don't think they get through the gauntlet. And the Jets proved it to me. Is that what you saw? Kind of wrap that game up. What was going on with Tampa? Where they just
I mean, the Jets played one of their best games of the year. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a letdown with Tampa. You're coming in to play a lowly Jets. You're probably like, we're going to just steamroll these guys. Then you have the Antonio Brown nonsense, which is kind of like, I think there was a letdown for them. The Jets were way up for it. This is probably, a very important game to them. Their last home game of the year. They're probably, they were probably rallied the troops for this one. But the Buccaneers are beatable, man. I mean, because now you have no Antonio Brown. You have no Godwin. You got to focus on Gronkowski. That's it. Gronkowski and Brate. And, Fournette's banged up. I'm sure he'll be back. But, I mean, I think there's other teams that are better than them at this point. I think the Packers and the Rams.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to monitor that story as the Jets definitely throw some vulnerabilities out there for the Bucs. The Bills have been monitoring that team as a potential. They kind of built a team to beat them and the Chiefs, the Packers, forgetting about the running teams, Ty. And then it came back to haunt them a little bit against the Indies and the Patriots of the world. And they're like, whoops, we forgot the team still run the ball in 2022. It's a thing, and that they'll beat you, and your offense can't overcome every single obstacle. Especially in weather elements, and the Bills are 0-5 in one-score games, and that's been a big talking point. That last year they were 5-1, only loss on a Hail Mary. This year they're 0-5, and just some terrible luck. DVOA has them as 3 wins higher based on all their metrics, and they just have had some luck, slipped and fell. I tweeted it just a couple of days ago that the Bills would be the 1 seed if Josh Allen's right leg doesn't slip out on a similar QB sneak. Good play by Simmons on the Titans defensive line. Josh Allen is the best running quarterback in the NFL. If you haven't seen that or watched him, you haven't watched him enough. He is absolutely a dynamic runner. He's 3rd all time on the Bills touchdown list already. He's an insane runner. Just nothing we've ever seen before. He still gets 6 inches. He was 30 for 31 going into that play. He still gets 6 inches, regardless if they're the play ball. He's fumbled, picked it up, and still gotten a yard in against Dallas. So you'll see that kind of stuff from Josh Allen. Just extremely unfortunate. Brings down that record, and they'd be the 1 seed right now, playing the Jets instead of for the division for the 1 seed. But you can't make your quarterback not slip.
That's football right now.
It's football. And like you said, I mean, like the Jets did on this weekend, the Bills didn't play good enough defense in that game, especially when their offense was ticking all day in Nashville. But let's look forward to this Jets game. There is something to play for here. We've kind of talked about it already. And I've just saw some names come off the COVID list for the Jets. Talk to me about their mindset. We're seeing like the Bengals rest players. We're seeing like the Browns do whatever they're doing. Like, what's the Jets mindset going into Buffalo? Are you looking for someone? Last time we played, it was the Mike White 4-pick game, and that was over before it began. McDermott is now 18-3 against teams with a losing record. I just tweeted that today. Only loss was a throwaway loss against the Jets when they had everything clinched. The Jacksonville game this year and a Browns game where they fumbled on 4th down, where they were going to win that a couple years ago. So McDermott is really good against teams with losing records.
It's going to be interesting, dude. I think it's going to be interesting because for a variety of reasons. I'm curious to see the mental. I mean, the Jets are going to play everybody. I think the only guy questioned more now is Elijah Moore, they're trying to get him back. But It's a leg injury. You really rush him back for this game in that kind of weather. I'm sure, on the err on the side of caution and don't play him. But everybody else is pretty much back. I think Crowder's back. Your boy Tyler Croft is back. So they got a lot of players back. But I'm curious to see what their mental mindset is, because there could be a letdown, an emotional letdown. As you play one of your best games at home against one of the best teams in the NFC, and you lost. Is there any kind of like drop off now? Because now you're going against the Bills on the road, hostile environment. Will they have the same tenacity, same intensity going into that game? I'm not so sure. But then also add in the weather and just the environment. This is probably the toughest environment Zach Wilson's going to play in this year. I think it will be. The crowd's going to be out of control. The intensity, the environment. How do they handle that? I'm not really sure. But in terms of health, I think the biggest injury is the left tackle. They're down to their third string guy now. Becton was out early game one. George Fant became like a folk hero around here because he played so well and replaced Becton. And now he got hurt. So now you're down to the third string left tackle. You're the backup center. So your offensive line could get tested pretty well on Sunday. And then it's like, if they do get tested, how does Zach Wilson react to that? The last 4 games, no interceptions. He looks like a much different player. He hasn't been forcing throws, hasn't been turning the ball over. But does he stay composed? Like, how do they as a team handle this? And I can't really answer that. We haven't seen it yet. Like, this is a whole different environment from this year. It's a big game for the Bills. It's just, how many players on Jets are going to compete? But be like, you know what? This is the last game of the season. I may not even be here next year. So you don't know.
Right. How do you view this season from your Jets perspective? Obviously, Zach Wilson, very difficult start to the year. Yep. Got that time off, whether that was good or not for him, but it seems like it's helped him out, at least reducing turnovers. Elijah Moore stepped up as a solid wide receiver. Defensively, obviously been a struggle stopping the run, but if there is one thing in the NFL, defense can normally go up and down. Yeah. But knowing what you know about the offense now and some of the improvement, are you encouraged heading into the offseason that there are some tools that you can at least work with and maybe take a step up to a 7-8 win team next year if things go right and you make some moves?
I think the biggest change is that Mike LaFleur went from the field to the booth. That was the biggest change there, because there was a time we thought Zach Wilson was just in over his head and Mike LaFleur was in over his head. You're like, what is this offense and what is this quarterback? He goes into the booth and things started to change. Elijah Moore started coming on. Things started to change. Michael Carter started coming on. You're like, wait a minute, now we have some building blocks here. So you look at the offensive line. You got Vera Tucker, another solid lineman, rookie. Yep. Michael Carter is becoming he's a legit running back, man. He's been banged up, unfortunately.
Are we going to see him with the concussion?
Supposedly he'll be back. That's what they're saying. He's a good player, man. He had a hot start last week and he got a concussion. He came out. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the offense, and this is how bad it's been for Jet fans, we felt like we were watching like a JV team for the last 3 years. Our offense was so antiquated. We were like, we didn't know what we were like. I was jealous of every other team in the NFL because our offense sucks so bad. And now this year we see a lot of innovation. We see creativity. We see motion. We're like, wow, this is an NFL offense. We actually take advantage of mismatches. We're taking, you feature guys like right now. Braxton Berrios is coming on with all kinds of sweeps and motions, and they feature a lot of guys that do a lot of interesting things, trick plays and gadget plays, and we've never seen that before. So Zach Wilson's picking it up now, which is what you want. Like the last 3 or 4 games, it seems like everybody's starting figuring it out. It's slowing down. They have an idea what they're doing. They understand the roles and responsibilities. And into next year, now you're like, all right, we have things here. I mean, Corey Davis has been out for a while now. But if you have, Corey Davis, you have Elijah Moore, say they re-sign Berrios, you got a couple good running backs. They desperately need a tight end in the worst way. But you actually feel encouraged by this rookie class after last year's disaster. They have like 4 or 5 starters that are legit. Like you have playmakers now. The defensive side of the ball is a whole nother whatever. But the offense for the Jets have not had an offense in years, man. So that's probably the brightest thing coming out of the season, like the potential of what they can do going forward.
Because one thing that has actually caught my eye about this Jets team, obviously the stats, they're not good if you break them down. But this is a team that has been able to catch a couple teams off guard. Yeah. Cincinnati played tight. Same with Tampa Bay recently. Both Miami games, 1-score games.
Tennessee
took care of business against Houston and Jacksonville. I mean, this ain't a good Jets team, but it seems like it's a team that can give you a game if you're not up to play. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that hurts them against Buffalo and New England is that because it's a divisional contest, you get their best regardless of what happens. But I would have to say, as a Jets fan, assuming that the front office makes the right decisions going forward, I would have some optimism going into next season. Now, that doesn't really say much about Sunday. I feel like that's going to be a tough situation, especially with the weather forecast. It's supposed to be a nightmare there. Talking about
what are we talking about, Mike?
What was that?
What are we talking about for the weather, Mike? Bring it to us.
All I know is it's supposed to be windy. They're saying like 20+ mile per hour winds. You're talking temperatures in the low 20s. It's going to be dark out. It's going to be miserable. So it's one of those games where if you have nothing to play for, you're probably just going to want to get on the plane and head back home and call it a season. But I'm not going to say that's going to be what the Jets do. Obviously, I think they've been playing strong to end the year. And if the coach gets them motivated, maybe they can keep it a game for a little while in this game.
I'd be curious to see how, like last week, the offensive line's been the biggest surprise the last couple of weeks for me because they keep losing players. Like to me, like once they lost Connor McGovern at center, I'm like, oh, we're screwed. I'm like, Dan Feeney can't play. We're in deep trouble. Then, Dan Feeney came in, played well. Then George Fant goes down. Like, oh, we're definitely going to get our butts kicked now. And then they play with it. And the most surprising is they're running the ball effectively. Like they're actually playing physical as hell on the line. Like that's the one thing, like early on their scheme, I'm like, wow, they can't run the ball. They can't do anything. Now they're running the ball effectively, where now it's like, you can get your 4 or 5 yards. You're going to give Zach Wilson, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3, or 3rd and 2. Like you have a lot more flexibility. Your play action pass opens up. So that's the only thing encouraging. If the weather is that bad, the Jets, especially if Michael Carter comes back, and Tevin Coleman's been surprisingly good too. And then our little secret weapons, Austin Walter, who's explosive, that if they can run the ball, maybe they can keep the game close, keep the score down. The time of possession could be in their favor. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they have opportunities to do that just based on how they played recently.
And the O-line, are we looking at Morgan Moses, AVT, LDT, Feeney, and then who is it? Van Roten still? Who's starting at right guard?
Van Roten's out. It's going to be Vera Tucker. It's going to be Adoga's on the left tackle. Feeney be center, be LDT, and then Morgan Moses. Okay. So LDT's been a find too. It's like it's surprising. It's a mismatched little group, but it's like they're kind of like bonding here and kind of fighting it out. And then Salah's been giving these pep talks the last couple of days, kind of like rallying his troops and like the kind of players he wants. And I think he may get a good effort. I think it's for you guys be pivotal. Like that first quarter is gonna be monumental. If you guys come out and smack us in the face for a drive or whatever, a couple sacks, this and that, the Jets could maybe go into a shell a little bit. But it's gonna be interesting. I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how the Jets come back, man. Because games like this, when you lose a close game like this at home, when you travel, you tend to kind of. If this game was at MetLife, I'd probably say maybe this is gonna be really interesting. But the fact it's in Buffalo, I'm kind of like, man, this could kind of spiral out of control.
And you got Adoga with a DNP. Is he expected to play?
I think he is. Last thing I heard, he was.
Okay. Because if he's out, then you are in trouble. Then you are in trouble.
Could you imagine?
Are Salah's pep talks better than Joe Judge's pep talks?
Oh, that guy! How does that guy keep his job, man?
I see you tweet about him. Yeah,
I see he's brutal. It's just. Have you listened to anything he's said? It's just
I saw his recent presser.
What a clown!
With all of that idiotic trash, and Dan Orlovsky just tore him
the golf clubs.
You can't speak like Bill Belichick if you haven't done anything to earn the respect of your players, But
you know what? The thing with Salah is that earlier in the season, I think he was very controlled and trying to be very corporate and professional, and it wasn't working because we're like, dude, who is this fraud? He was sitting on the sidelines with his arms crossed, penalty after penalty, and he's kind of like, okay, like thanks, have another. And then the losing started piling up, and you can see his face, like you can see the coaches haven't slept in a while. He's got the bags under his eyes, and then I think he had a little dispute with Rex Ryan over, I guess, whatever they were talking about defense or some nonsense. And after that, you saw Salah's personality come out. Now he's riding the referees. He's more animated. He's more passionate, and the team feeds off of that. Now his press conferences, he puts some things out there where you're like, dude. Sometimes he comes off like he's not taking any accountability. He comes off kind of weird, but then the next day he kind of recovers from it. Like Sunday, he made some comments that were kind of weird, but then Monday he kind of cleared it up and made it sound like it was like he knows what he's doing. So he's learning too, man. But Joe Judge is just a buffoon. I don't like. The Giants should fire him. He should be fired today. Yeah, he's terrible.
Judge is awful, but like you said, it takes time to learn how to be a head coach in the NFL. We talk about Sean McDermott like he's a god, but year one there was a lot of questionable things that happened in Buffalo, and if he hadn't
year
lucked
two
into
as well
the playoffs that first year, and then followed it up with the year two that he had, he would have gone into year three with a lot of fire beneath him going into that year. So. That is encouraging that Salah is starting to show some more of that personality, because he was the main target going into last offseason. He was the main guy that people thought could be a good head coach one day. So I still think that can definitely be the case going forward.
Let's hope, man. It's like you come into this market after Adam Gase. I mean, we were a disaster. You guys know we were a laughing stock. So you got to change the culture. You got to change the perception. You got to get the face of the franchise until we find a player to be that guy. So right now, Salah's the guy. Like, you want it to be Zach Wilson, but Salah is like front and center he takes all like the bullets for everybody right now, and he's handling it well. But this is a year of no expectations. Like, same thing you guys said. You know, year one, you get a lot of passes, you get a lot of excuses, you justify losing because it's year one. Next year is the challenge, because next year we're all going to expect more. Like, that's the way it works in the NFL. You guys know how it is. It's going to be a big step up for him.
And the Bills got lucky with year one trading and tanking and winning and making the playoffs. Was one of the more insane feats. I mean, and then they go and they lose like 10-3 against Jacksonville in the first round, but it was still to break the drought. It was an insane. The clip still played to this day of Andy Dalton throwing it to Tyler Boyd here in Buffalo, where our streak was over, and just Sean McDermott at that point, 9-7 with a pretty bad team.
That still means more to Buffalo fans, I think, than anything else in the last 4 or 5 years outside of the run to the AFC Championship last year. Like, if this team somehow loses in the first round, that 17 run will always be looked at with more magic, just because it wasn't supposed to happen that way. And it ended so many years.
First year coach traded Watkins. Like, think about it. Like, think about everything that went down.
Now, I do have one garbage question, Kev, if you don't mind me throwing that.
I love garbage questions.
That's why we're here.
And this truly is a garbage question. So obviously there's a lot of quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year. Number one, Trevor Lawrence, he is not panned out, but you can put a lot of that on coaching. A couple of the other guys, really not a ton of opportunities with the guys in Chicago and San Fran. But we all know Mac Jones is getting hyped like the next Tom Brady and savior in New England. We talk to our Patriots friends once in a while to hear what Patriots Nation is saying. Obviously, I don't believe what I'm going to ask you is the case, but I'm going to ask you how you feel. If Mac Jones was on New York and not New England, do you think the Jets would be a much improved team this year? Or do you think it would be similar to what you are seeing from Zach Wilson?
I think Mac Jones went into the absolute perfect scenario for a rookie quarterback, where it's a win-now team surrounded by a great coaching staff, veteran players, all these different things. If he would have came here to the Jets, he would have been demoralized, beaten up, and I don't think it's just I think Zach Wilson's got a much higher ceiling than Mac Jones does. And I'm not being a biased Jet fan. I just think he does. I think Mac Jones is a pocket passer. He's limited. He's good for that system he's in now. But in the offseason, teams are going to figure out how to game plan for him. You're going to figure out ways to beat him. You know, Zach Wilson and the other guys, you have to be more well-rounded. You can be more versatile. So, I mean, and I'm probably going to get called biased and whatever else. I just think if Mac Jones was here and Zach Wilson was in New England, Zach Wilson would be having success there and Mac Jones would be struggling here. It's just that look where he went into, man. That's like a perfect spot for him. But I think once the playoffs come and you get tested by a lot of good teams will scheme for him. Similar to, like, reminds me almost with Chad Pennington, where Chad Pennington was a good quarterback, but limited. Like the Baltimore Ravens figured out how to beat him. Take away the short passing game, take away this, take away that, and he couldn't get those certain plays off. He just couldn't do them. And then that was then he got hurt, but then it was you saw where he was going. So
yeah, for sure. You saw it with the Bills against Mac Jones, absolutely dominated him. One of the games was a win game, so fine. Mac Jones is like, I forget his total stat line. He has like 150 total yards in 2 games, a bunch of picks. He's like completely inaccurate. Sean McDermott is wonderful against limited players like that, and just drops into his cover 2 shell, covers anything short, takes away the run. They couldn't do it the first game, unfortunately, just in weird, crazy circumstances. But, they were able to dominate in New England. Really a game the score was probably closer than the game was, in my opinion. The Bills are really good against New England just a couple weeks ago. But yeah, you saw his limitedness right there with a good defensive staff was able to take away, and it's only going to get harder for Mac. I mean, I think they're going to match up against Cincy. And that's a pretty, they're going to need to score. But at the same time, like, it might be a good matchup because I think there's some defensive holes on Cincy. So that might be a good team that they get to have to play in the first round. So we'll see how that turns out as the playoffs approach. But the Bills are very likely to play the Colts, the Raiders. If that happens, really does depend if the Bengals throw the game or not, because they're not playing anybody. So if they do throw the game and the Raiders win, and the Bills win, they'll be playing the Raiders. So talk to me as a Jet fan, and if it was you in it, what team do you want to match up with versus New England? Would you want to match up with Indy? Would you want to match up with the Raiders? Obviously, least likely because they do need to beat the Chargers still. But tell me, talk to me about, if you're a Bills fan, in Ty's opinion, who are you matching up with round 1 in Buffalo next week?
Dude, I would want to avoid. Well, Tennessee's the number 1 seed. The Tennessee, to me, the Colts are dangerous, man. That running game, I like Frank Reich. I wish Frank Reich was a coach of the Jets when they interviewed him a few years ago, and it still pisses me off. Well coached, and that running game, they're physical, man. Any team with those smash mouth running attacks want nothing to do with them. So take those two out. The Raiders make it. I'd like to play them because they self-destruct. The Raiders always find ways to lose games. I like Derek Carr. He's probably not going to come back next year, but the Raiders they'll come out hot. They'll make some big splash plays, and they always find ways, either penalties or dumb turnovers. They always collapse in some facet. The Patriots are always well coached. They're very competitive, but listen, I think that Mac Jones, you can take advantage of them. So, the other teams, I think the Bengals are very good. They're high-flying offense. They're coming on right now. So to me, it's Raiders. The Patriots I don't think are forced anymore. So I think I'd probably go with those two teams.
Yeah, you'd pick those two. Yeah, and obviously, I don't know if the Bills have any real odds to match up against the Chargers. I don't think I've seen many. So I think it would take a KC loss, which I guess we'll know on Saturday, if anything, if the Bills have even extra to play for here on Sunday, Ty. If we see something goofy like KC open the door because the Bills have the tiebreaker on them for this 2 seed, then it becomes a little bit more interesting for the Bills to be able to back-to-back 2 seeds, get home field beside Tennessee. Really only rooting for Tennessee to get upset at some point, and then you're in really good shape. But I don't think Derek Carr can come. We already saw Mac Jones can't. They can't come to Buffalo, and they can't play in these elements. And it affects Josh Allen, though. That's the biggest thing that we're having right now as Bills fans, and we're having internal debates about, let's put a retractable roof on it here. These weather conditions are ridiculous. But it's because Josh decided, they asked him, and he said no comment when they asked him if he wanted a roof. And he's our $300 million quarterback. And at some point, he's an amazing runner, and the Bills won the game on his legs. But I mean, the tip passes, the wind, the issues.
The wind is wild, man.
For his arm strength, just the issues that we've seen with Josh Allen in elements begin to worry us a little bit about
it's impossible not to impact you. Everybody who wants to rescind what you say about building a dome or a retractable roof, they're forgetting a lot of key points. A lot of people will say, well, Big Ben won in Pittsburgh or Tom Brady in New England. Yes, those are bad places to play weather-wise as well. But you know what? Those teams also had great rushing attacks. And the Bills do not have a team that when you need to run the ball, you can have faith in them. Now, they've run the ball better of late, which is encouraging. But for the most part,
the last hour they
struggled to run the ball. And it's just one of those things, as Kevin said earlier, every game at home this year has just been horrible weather. And
but
I guess Aaron Rodgers deals with a lot of the same stuff in Green Bay, and you're not seeing his stats be impacted as much. But I swear, if half the quarterbacks in the league played under the conditions that Josh Allen has in Buffalo, their numbers would be looking pretty ugly too, because I can recall at least a couple games where
look at Mac Jones.
It was just pointless even going on in the field. You're playing New
Carson
England.
Wentz couldn't throw the ball either. Mitchell Trubisky had came in at one point, literally couldn't get it out of his hands. It's a major issue. The difference is the wind. It's not the snow. The snow is what everyone thinks about. The snow's not that hard to play in. The Bills won a crazy 6-foot snow game where people couldn't get out of the parking lot to make the playoffs in that same season a couple of years, 2017. But they could throw. Joe Webb was in there dropping dimes to Deontay Thompson. Third string quarterback receiver to our 6th receiver. They were dropping dimes in that game. You couldn't run the ball actually. So, the snow is not the biggest world. Aaron Rodgers has proved it. The wind is ridiculous. You can't kick, you can't punt, you can't do anything. Like, you can't hand the ball off. We saw a fumble because they couldn't hand the ball. The wind took the ball on a handoff.
We even had a game where a Carolina kicker got hurt pregame.
I saw that, yeah.
after the healthy scratches were announced, and they had to play with a positional player kicking.
I saw that
the entire game. So it's just been interesting.
The only question I have for you guys, though, is because I watch Bills games all the time, and yeah, I'm
Frank
not saying
the Tank,
that,
man. He doesn't think we're going to get that 2 or 3 seed.
Yeah. So the one question I have for you guys is, you talk about Josh Allen's a great running back, a great runner, and he is. He gets a lot of yards. But the weird thing to me is, it's like, if you don't have a running game or running backs running the ball, do you guys ever get concerned with him running the ball so much and taking the hits? Like getting hit in the wrist, getting hit in the shoulder, like taking all those hits, as in theory, a featured running back that's always being relied on.
I think right now the thought process is he's young and he's able, so it's okay for now. But in time, they want to get away from it. But I think they're still okay with it for this year and the next couple years. But I think as he gets closer to 30, they're going to have to rely on him throwing it and kind of taking the run out, unless it's a special moment in a game. Right now, this team, honestly, if he didn't run the ball, they wouldn't have enough, I guess, mixing it up on offense to be able to get by. They tried just throwing the ball nonstop early in the year, and he was getting brutalized on plays. He's one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the league. Ever since they started going a little bit more QB heavy, line is starting to hold up better, and he's having more time to find guys. So I think it's out of necessity at this point, but they definitely don't want to make it a Cam Newton situation where that's what he's going to do, and he's going to get killed by the time he's 33, 34 years old.
Yeah. No, I mean, I respect his size and his athletic ability and his running style. But I'm like, he takes some big hits, and I'm like, as you know, especially in the playoffs, like, you're one hit to the wrist or arm away from being out of the game. And it's like, he takes so it's an interesting offense to see him do that, but it's risky.
You know what's interesting about it, and from a Bills perspective, is obviously he's 240. He's bigger than pretty much anyone but the defensive lineman. You know, when he gets out, he's smarter than you'd think. You usually see the hits from smaller players, like where he's been banged up or hurt in his career is in the pocket. It's where he's the worst. He gets hurt worse in the pocket. So you have just as much of an odds as he's getting hit there. That's where he's only historically ever been hurt in his career.
That's
he took a cheap shot against New England.
And the Houston hit when he was a rookie.
In the pocket.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Other than that, in his career, he's been healthy, and you see him jump up, and it pumps you up, and it almost is like DB shy away from him. It's straight up. You get a little bit worried when a DN or someone catches him from behind. That's when you start to. It's more for me. It's more lower body to me, like where if someone catches him, rolls up on him, something like that. But he's just so big. He's so physical. He's a good runner. He's limited his fumbles to where they're the 6th best running team in the league. You would think that they're last. But Josh Allen is that incredible. And now Devin Singletary's 100-yard game last week, and he's getting going. And he's been good. And the Bills in the 12th hour figure out an offensive line. We don't know how it happened. Out of nowhere, the offensive line's been dominant. They held Matt Judon down. The Falcons were non-existent in the trenches. So they figured something out with Rick Bates. Just this guy, undrafted free agent. They traded a nobody from Philly. And he's been an excellent fill-in guard. And Mitch Morse has been better. Deion Dawkins is finally over like 3 bouts of COVID. And Darrell Williams is a better guard out of nowhere. And they're getting Spencer, they're getting a lot out of Spencer Brown, a rookie 3rd-round pick that they love the pick and the development. So that the Bills offensive line out of nowhere was their weakest point and is now good. It's now above average. So you feel pretty good about him in the pocket right now. He hasn't been sacked at all underneath this new offensive line in 2 games. So they're feeling good. They need to run the ball to be better. That's where the Bills are better than you. They have the good receivers. You saw Isaiah McKenzie just absolutely dominate as the Bills' 5th receiver. So you have the receivers. You now have a running back developing. You now have an offensive line developing. But what makes you different isn't even any of that. It's Josh. You don't know how you could play him because his improv throwing the ball, the throws he can make, and his ability to run the ball. You just don't know what to do as a defense, Ty. So that's what separates.
No, absolutely.
And if you take one facet away, like Mike said, we saw it a little bit earlier where they're like, stop running. Like, we need you to throw in the pocket. We need you to hit your great receivers. You got 2 good slot receivers. You have 2 boundary receivers. You have Gabriel Davis out of nowhere. You have all these guys that have been in. Then Dawson Knox finally developed. You have all these players, 5, 6, 7 weapons. Throw to them. And teams are like, now we're dropping in that cover 2 deep shell, the Patrick Mahomes shell. The cover 2, high 2, the safeties. And it's worked, and with mush rushes and keeping them in the pocket. But really where he burns you is design quarterback runs. It's up the middle. It's just things if the offensive line's holding up, you just can't get to them. And we'll probably see that. But that's a good point. I'm interested to see with what's on the line. The division is on the line for the Bills. So I don't think they'll go vanilla. They're not going to go not calling real plays. They need to beat a Jets team that proved that they can compete. They didn't lay down like we saw Jacksonville just do.
Right.
They didn't. So,
but I think where you guys had like what you just said about your offensive line being like, improving and Josh Allen running is where the Jets have struggled the most. The Jets can't stop the run, man. And I don't understand why, because they have talent up front. Everybody keeps saying it's a young defense, all these different things, but they have, in theory, Quinn and Williams, you got Rankins, you got guys like John Franklin Myers. They should be able to stop the run, and they can't. And it's always up the middle, man. Every friggin' time, 6 yards a carry, 7 yards a carry, and you give Josh Allen that, then you guys can do all kinds of things on 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 1 or whatever else. So that's going to be, I'm telling you, you'll establish the run if you can do that. And the weird thing is, I like Singletary. I'm surprised that that's happened with him. You guys, I always liked him, but you guys, that's going to be the biggest key is your offensive line against our defensive line. If you guys can manhandle us like most teams have over the last 12 games, it'll be smooth sailing for you.
I don't even think that Singletary has been even the main issue. I think it's just been whenever it's been an obvious rundown, it's just been tough for them to get any movement early in the year, at least. And it wasn't really until the last couple of weeks where you're starting to see Singletary get some holes. He's elusive. He can make some yardage even out of nothing. His big thing is he just doesn't have any burst. Right. He's put on some muscle. He's actually been playing very physical lately, kind of just running through some guys, which is the opposite of what you would have thought from Singletary coming into the league. But he actually is, I think, one of the top 10, 12 guys in the NFL in yards per carry. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, the Bills do get yards rushing the ball. It's just that they do it in non-traditional ways. Yeah. So when a lot of us are saying the Bills run game sucks, you can't just look at the numbers. The numbers don't really support that they can't run the ball. It's just that when it comes to traditional, it's 3rd and 1, you need a yard up the middle. You can't rely on the Bills to be able to just pound it up the middle and get that yard. They might need to do something special or toss outside.
I mean, they've been running quarterback power now.
So it's in the modern NFL, they're okay. They get by. But if you wanted to judge them by some of the older ways, that's where they're kind of more held back. But like we said, it is getting better heading into December. And one thing, not to waste your time with all this, one thing that does interest me about that is I think McDermott wanted this to start happening a lot earlier in the year with the Bills developing more of a power run game at times. And you would always see Bill Belichick with the Patriots where they'd be throwing all over teams in September, October, November. And then suddenly December comes and they would find their opponent, whether it be the Bills, the Jets, and they'd pick a game where they would just run for 250 on you.
Usually the Jets.
You'd be like, how are they running it like this? They're running for 6 yards a carry. And you're like, they have Tom Brady. And you think, well, they're just going to throw it all over us. But they show they can run it because come playoff time,
that's what
they're
matters.
Basically saying we can do whatever we want on you. And maybe that's a little bit of what McDermott's trying.
The Bills are trying that method right now, Ty. So we'll see. That's what I'm interested in against the Jets because they need the game, but they need to also show what they can do going into the playoffs. And they need to watch what they're calling. They can't do literally everything and put it all on the table like this is the Super Bowl. But at the same time, the Bills feel pretty confident on the road. So if something catastrophic goes wrong for the Bills, they've proven they can win on the road. Like they'll probably, if they had to go to New England, if the Bills lost to the Jets, their most likely destination is New England.
Right.
And if they have to go there, I don't think they're overly worried about it.
I don't think so either.
I mean, so they get to play free for the most part. And then once you knock off New England, you're just in the Final Four like everybody else.
Yep.
So you already won in KC. You played super well in Tennessee outside of a slip. You know, you're there. And obviously if you beat New England, you'd probably be on the road to Tennessee. And the Bills fans want to just put this bugaboo away from Derrick Henry and get this Tennessee team out of here. Believe it or not, the biggest like hatred we have right now is with Titans. I mean, they're brutal. It's a brutal fan base. That AFC South's a mess, but that fan base is just a mess. If you guys become good someday and people come into your chat room, they're a mess, dude. It is.
Really?
It is. They're a
they're brutal
fan base. They're a horrible fan base. just straight up. I would take Jets fans. I would take Dolphins fans, 49ers fans, whatever. Dude, the Titans fans, the cocky new school Titans fans are just insufferable, dude. They go personal attacks. Yeah, they're not.
It goes back to a stupid thing though. It goes back to that Fox fan poll like 3 or 4 years ago. Where the Bills have won this online Twitter contest 2 years in a row that Fox runs. That's fan votes for best fans in the NFL. It's some stupid thing on Twitter. Well, the one year the Bills and the Titans went against each other in the semifinals, and the Bills had like a 55-45% lead, something like that, with like 1 hour left, and there's like 100,000 votes.
Right.
Conceivably, there's no chance of like it getting reversed. And then suddenly the next 30,000 votes all went to Tennessee, and they end up winning it. They win, I think, the best fans contest, and basically they were calling Bills fans sour grapes. Well, the Bills end up winning a couple straight games against the Titans. Our fans talk crap to them. Now they're winning these close, heartbreaking games for us, and it's all this bad blood over.
But you forgot the moral of that story, Mike. Ty, they bought votes. They spent money for bots to go in and dupe the pool. So we calculated thousands of dollars. So they pooled money together.
The dumbest stuff in the world, but
to win a pool that even our media talk, occasionally our own media will bring it up.
That's ridiculous.
When Titans fans come in their mentions, but they're bad, dude.
But yeah, we're a little salty because if you haven't noticed, we lost the Music City Miracle.
I remember that too.
And every time we play the Titans and we lose a heartbreaker, we're reminded of our heartbreaking last second.
That's interesting. The Jets were 3-1 against the South, as Frank the Tank just mentioned to me.
That's right.
Yeah, good. I mean, I mean, it's not a great division, but that's still.
We were
1-3.
South.
The Bills are in the 1 seed if they do better against the AFC. The AFC South,
we were 1-3. Bills were 1-3.
Yeah.
The AFC South alone took the Bills out of the 1 seed. So
half the losses.
So how do you guys look at, as of right now, how do you look at the season going into the last week of the season? Like, because you guys, we talked earlier on in the year where you guys, to me, were like one of the AFC contenders. I think you still are. But as of right now, do you consider the season a success, or are you a little disappointed? Like, how do you evaluate it so far?
Kev, I'll go first if you don't mind. And
yeah,
I'll be quick. I'd say roller coaster. Impossible to define if it's a success or not. We have to wait to see what happens in the playoffs. If they lose in the first round, it's a failure by most of the fan base's expectations. A loss in the second round depends on how they lose. If you get blown out, failure. If they lose a heartbreaker, that's just what happens. You get to the playoffs, anything can happen. But I think most rational Bills fans would say there's been a lot of unlucky breaks. When you're 0-5 in one-score games, what's really the big difference from this year and last year? Really, you just didn't win the close ones.
Right.
So I think most rational Bills fans would say this is still a very good team, just didn't go their way, and hopefully they get hot at the right time.
Right.
But you definitely have to wait until the playoffs start to really see.
But got to at least win one game in the playoffs
or not.
Yeah. I think one game's the bar. I think the Bills have had too many, like Mike said, too many losses in one-score games. Like the regression's there. And we're hoping it happens in the playoffs. These one-score games that'll show up again. The Bills haven't had many lately, but the Bills just continue to blow teams out. So, or at least 10 victories this year, Ty, of over 12 points. They have not played they just take care of business.
Right.
You know, the only time they ever played down to their competition was against the Jags. And we still don't know what happened that game. The offensive line was the reverse of what it is now. It was just a complete mess. They were mixing and matching. Brown was out. They had some issues. it was just a horrible performance. Yeah. And eventually the Bills were like, we're the Bills. We're just going to beat them on the last drive. And they had that, you could tell they had that mindset, and they were doing it, driving down to the 30. The next thing you know, sack out of nowhere. They're at the 50 now, 3rd and 20. And they're like, holy shit. Like, if we don't get this done, we lose. And they didn't get it done, and they lost. And that's literally the game. It was like 6-6, 6-6, 6-6, 6-6.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen, made a play and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, he did.
But I mean, he's a good player, but he was really good that day. So clearly they were arguing for their name.
It is amazing when you point that out, though. 10 wins by 12 plus points. The way national narratives work, and obviously you're used to all of the narratives in New York City. If they win, if they go 3-2 or even 2-3 in those games, and you're 12-4 going to week 18, the national narrative is the Bills are Super Bowl favorites and they're one of the best teams in the NFL. What really kind of happened by losing those games is you had a portion of the fan base kind of a larger percentage than I would like to admit kind of gave up on the team. There was a lot of people in Buffalo that started saying they're not that good, overrated, same old Bills. They'll be lucky to make the playoffs. Now, that was kind of the irrational part of the fan base, but a lot of national media started crowning New England as soon as they went on that 6-game winning streak.
They sure did.
I think the Bills have actually used that to their advantage. I'm not a big guy on you pay attention to the media, but I think they're playing the whole we're being overlooked, and they have some evidence to support it. And they've caught fire at the right time because I think the mistakes that they made early in the season in those close losses, the not going for it on 4th down, the not being aggressive, a few of the lapses, I think they've shown steps to move past that. So
I think that's a good way to put it.
Hopefully, when those situations pop up again, which they inevitably will in the playoffs, they won't revert back to what cost them in all those close games.
And I'm harder. I think they need to make it back to the AFC Championship game. Losing a heartbreaker against Tennessee again, I think you would consider it not a huge failure, but you'd consider the season in whole a failure.
Yeah.
I would think you would barely qualify for that category, but you would say it is a failure. They did go back. They did win some playoff games. They did their thing. Next year might be the year. They still have everyone signed. They're still in pretty good shape with some stuff, but it's still you would expect to do at least what you're able to do, especially riding high in the first half of the season, taking care of KC, basically thinking you had the 1 seed, and then all of a sudden dropping to Indy and Jacksonville and New England in the win game. And all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, we're like the 4 seed now all of a sudden, which has happened. So I think the proposal question back to you though, Ty, that I wanted to ask you, and this is something I had here in our script, was how do you feel about this game in terms of like, okay, the Bills clinched, so it's not like you can get them out of the playoffs, right? So it's like, is it that material to get them from the 4 to the 6 seed? Is that like a big enough, and give New England the division? Is that like enough motivation? And then on top of that, hurt your draft position? So we've talked about this on this show years and years ago, where like, how do you look at these week 16, week 17, week 18 games? Like, obviously you want to see good stuff, and absolutely no doubt about it. But like, talk to me about, like, at the end of the day, is knocking the Bills from 4 to 6, knocking New England into the 4, like, that motivating? And like, is it really helpful to the team?
Yeah.
You can say yes. Is it helpful to the team to win that and maybe pick, you tell me, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, however?
It's interesting from like a fan perspective and a team perspective, because like from a fan perspective, I'm like, there's 2 ways to look at it. Like, the last thing as a Jet fan I want is the Patriots to win the division, because I hate the Patriots. I can't stand them. So like, and I think Jet fans can always relate to Bills fans. We all understand each other. We have a lot of Bills fans that support our show, so like we're super cool to everybody. But the jerk Jet fan of me was the one that was there a few years ago when you guys bounced us out of the playoffs. And
that was Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Dude, I had an 8-hour ride home in a friggin' blizzard for that, because like after the game there was a snowstorm, so it took us forever to get home.
Sorry.
So we didn't make the playoffs. And knocked us out of, so I had, but I mean, the only thing is, Jet fans right now we're rooting for, to be completely honest with you, is like, have Zach Wilson play very well and they lose. Like last week, the Buccaneer game, were like, you get yourself caught up into it. You're like, wow, like this is it, because like you want to see him win, you get caught up, and then you're like, you know what? He played great and they lost. You're the number 4 pick in the draft right now. So now it's like there's not like, I know you want to rally troops, you want to see him play well against the Bills, but if beating the Bills means the Patriots win the division, that's kind of nauseating. like I don't really like that would just piss me off.
They get to talk about you guys are competing with them too because they get Mac Jones. They get to say they got the quarterback out of even Trevor Lawrence and the rest. They get to say this. The one they even try to hit us with as Patriots fans, and maybe you've heard this, their rebuild only took a year. Everybody else's takes 10 or 12 or 8. We went from Brady, one Cam Newton over to Mac Jones, and the division is ours.
They claim the Bills Super Bowl run window already closed. There's a great clip on NBC Sports Boston where they said 1 year. That's the Bills AFC East title run back to New England.
Yeah.
And,
Such
just the snobbish reactions by their panel was just enough to make any Bills, Patriots, Dolphins fan just
I mean that's where it's like but that's like Jet fans now. We argue this all the time, especially this week where it's like, who do you want to see win the division? We're like the Bills. Like I like the Bills. I like Josh Allen. It's like I don't have hatred towards you guys. I mean, we always want to compete, but if they have something to play for this Sunday, I'm sure they're gonna be motivated. But I think most Jet fans, for being completely transparent, it's a 17-point spread, or probably it could be more than that by this point. But like the Jets play a very competitive game. They come out, they come prepared, they don't embarrass themselves. Zach Wilson plays well and they lose. We're all cool with it because like the season's over. Get the draft pick, get Zach Wilson out of the game healthy. We've seen enough progress to this point that this one game is not going to make or break the season, and you kind of move on from there. You know, like I don't think they're just going to be like this hell-raising speech. We got to knock we're not knocking you out of the playoffs. Like that would be a little bit more if you're knocking you out of the playoffs. So now it's like, all right, like I'm just hoping they're competitive. Zach does enough, and then just get off to the offseason. You know, and the draft pick now doesn't matter to us.
That matters more than who wins, Bills or New England. I mean, let's be honest. Like at least we've been in this position until 2017, like every year. So in my entire year talking and covering the Bills, like even in 2018 when they were like, we've had the discussion of when they play, certain teams, like is it helpful? Like when we beat the Jets, I don't remember what year that was. It wasn't like that. Like it did knock you out. So it's a little different. And I think that was Rex Ryan had something to play for, right? Was Rex Ryan the coach at that point?
I think that was his first year. I think he was 7-8. I think that was January 16 or something.
What can we do with that? Like he had a personal like motivation there, but like for us, like I didn't care. Like I didn't necessarily need the Bills to knock the Jets out. It probably did. It did knock them down a couple pegs, and it makes that draft pick a couple of percentage points more that you'll miss it. Is there movement if the Jets win? How would that affect? Like, what are we talking here? Like,
I'm not sure how many spots they can move down. To be honest, maybe one or two. I'm not really sure, but I just know we're at 4, and I think right now we're all at that point where it's just like we're okay with a loss on Sunday. It's like, which is not like you don't want to say it, but it's like, listen, play well, lose, get the draft pick, and move on. Like you probably gonna have 2 picks in the top 10, which is a good spot to be in. So, and we need elite playmakers. We got to upgrade the roster, and that's kind of where you're at. Like it's just not where it's like you're knocking somebody out that you desperately hate. Like if it was Jets Patriots this weekend, we can knock them out. We're like, dude, we want to. You want to win it badly, but this one, it's just like we're all kind of like, all right, like beating the Buccaneers would have been pretty cool because you're there in the moment. It's like this is one of the best teams in the NFC. It was a home game, all these different things, Tom Brady, all this stuff. But then it's like they lost. Like, all right, the next day you're like, okay, we lost, and we're still a top 4 pick. So
I will say though, it is kind of funny that you're saying this because last year the Bills obviously played Miami the last week of the season with nothing to play for besides the 2 or the 3. And with Josh Allen playing a quarter and a half, they ended up winning 56 to like 26. So knocking them out of the playoffs. So, and I do have to say that did feel good. I know that sounds,
but that's a full knockout scenario too.
Where
the better team's beating the team trying to get in, and like that's a full knockout. Like I said already, if the Jets could knock them out, that's motivation for anybody, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to lose. The Giants probably would jump you. There's a couple of teams there that the Panthers. I can't remember looking at the order earlier before the show, but there are a couple of teams right there that you would cost yourself a picker or two by doing it. But that's cool. Like you end on a high note, you knock the Bills out. I think that is, I'll admit that is fairly motivating to do, but to knock them from the 4 to the 6, to give New England the 2 or the 3 too, because of their tiebreaker shit. Like, I don't know.
Like, I think you think it's just even like the player too. It's the last game of the season on the road in that kind of environment. Like, I know you're going to get a solid effort, but I think as the game tapers on a little bit and the score gets a little bit, like say you're down 10-0, whatever it is, I think the effort and things like that, injuries may start popping up. I think it's the last game of the season, man. On the road. I think, think
it's time. I'm saying all that. You know, we've hit an hour. Appreciate all your time coming on the show here tonight. Always a great guest. We're obviously going to get you on, or maybe even in the off season too. And I think Affirm's got us covered. If we win in both the Giants and Carolina lose, you drop to 6.
Okay. Yeah, he knows. Affirm's like our salary cap and our salary cap and everything else guy. He knows everything, man. Contract, salary cap, draft. So. Yeah.
2 picks starts to be where the number. Where
let's lose. Let's keep us at 4.
If you wouldn't move at all, that's fine. That's more motivating to me. But 2 picks potentially.
Nope. I'm good.
Putting New England in the 3 or 2 seed, like,
nope.
I'd want if that's us in that scenario. I would not want that. But it's time. Like, you got to tell us, how does this game go? Tell us after all we've talked about, all lines both ways. Talk to us about, you know, and you know, the rush defenses. Talk to us about the score and why, and what you see from the Jets.
I think it's gonna be an interesting game just to see how the Jets come out. They're a young team, and they're facing a very tough spot. You know, on the road, crazy environment, very good team, has a lot to play for. And I just think the weather conditions. I just think the Jets may try to. I don't know. They may try to run the ball, get Zach Wilson comfortable. But if the wind is saying what it is, I think the Bills are going to start teeing off on them. I think it's going to probably be a low-scoring game. Like the 17-point spread, I think, is probably a little bit too high in my opinion. But who knows? But the Jets defense has not been good against the run. So if you guys can establish that, especially with Josh Allen, we can't cover running backs out of backfield or any kind of tight end, which has been a problem all season long. You guys have Diggs, which I'm a big Stephon Diggs fan. So, you know, Bryce Hall's been okay, but you have a lot of matchups you can take advantage of, similar to what we talked about last time. I think the only difference between this game and the last game is that Zach Wilson is playing better. And Michael Carter's come on and Zach Wilson come on. But if Elijah Moore's not going to be playing, then you're back down to your third, fourth, and fifth receiver again this week. So, and then Jamison Crowder's coming back, but he's not fully healthy. So if the Bills can get pressure, if they can get pressure on Zach Wilson and stop the run, it's gonna be a long day for the Jets, man. Especially in that I keep saying it, but this is Zach Wilson's first time in this kind of hostile environment, man, on the road with these kind of conditions. I just not sure how he's going to react to it. So I think they may get ultra conservative, which is concerning. So,
but you have to lose. Like, are you worried about him getting hurt? Like, to me, I don't want to just see him. Like, do you really need to run Tevin Coleman, or do you? Like,
I think they will, dude. I think they'll run Coleman. Okay. They'll run Michael Carter. That's a big part of their game, is establishing the run to spread things out. They do a lot of motion, man. But I'm just curious how they handle it. If the Bills are getting a tremendous amount of pressure, how do they do that? Especially with a backup left tackle and a backup center. You know, so the physicality of the game, I think, is going to be interesting. Do the Jets match that tenacity? Are they willing to, you know, do they go toe to toe, or do they kind of back off a little bit? You know,
it's an interesting note. The Bills have been dominant at the defensive tackle position. Ed Oliver has been absolute wrecking ball. Harrison Phillips out of nowhere just saved his career and is now a usable defensive tackle, like really good play. Both of them are getting the majority of their snaps now at the defensive tackle position. They've been dominant up there. And when you got a good Milano and Edmonds, when they're playing at the top of their game, they are a really tough team to run on. Like, as much as you see the numbers and you see what New England did with no throwing the ball, like 6 linemen, etc. Fine. The Bills have struggled in a couple of games, but they were missing linebackers in some of those games. And the defensive tackles and the linebacker combination has been excellent here. Average at defensive end, even though the Bills draft 7 of them every year, it's still average. They have wasted like 7 assets and like $70 million to correct defensive end, and you still have Hughes and Addison as your top 2 guys. Concerning, Rousseau's finally coming on. He's the only one that we've seen develop so far. And you've seen some moments from Epinesa, some moments out of Boogie Basham, high draft picks there as well. So I want to see them get going against the Jets. McDermott will make Wilson win you the game. If they win the game, he's got to win you the game.
Well,
I just don't see any way the running game beats them.
Well, that's the thing. I think that the Bills are going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on the line, say Zach Wilson beat us. And if they do that, it's a third string. Yeah, it's Becton's out, Fant's out. You're the third string. And Veer Tucker's playing good, but they're going to pressure the line and say Zach Wilson beat us, and especially if it's windy as hell. So it's like, all right, you got to offset all these things, a hostile crowd and the wind, with your top 3 receivers out.
Yeah. I mean, it's something. I mean, if the Bills are vulnerable in the playoffs, and the Jets did a good enough job against Tampa Bay, like, look, Frank the Tank says, you know,
they did do that, but that's okay. Did Tampa Bay kind of sleepwalk into that game? They also didn't have Shaq Barrett, they didn't have Jason Pierre-Paul. You know, did Tampa Bay kind of look past Jets a little bit, like this is the Jets, man? You know, like I give the Jets credit for what they did, but I'm not going to be brash enough to say we just did it last week. We're going to do it this week against the Bills on the road. The Jets on the road haven't played well a lot of times, so you know
Reverse Bills, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny is the one thing that it's funny saying this, the Jets won't do to the Bills is catch them now. The Jags caught them going down the similar story as the Bucs did, going down to Jacksonville and just not caring. It's not going to happen. It's the first time they're going to be able to clinch the division in front of their fans since 1995. There's no way McDermott and them are caught. As funny as it sounds that with the Jets record, they're not going to catch the Bills sleeping. They're going to get. That's what we talk. How did we start the show? Like, I don't think you're getting a vanilla Bills game. Like you're not going to get them running vanilla plays, the outside zone and nothing else. Like you're going to see actual play calls, and you might see and you saw it last week. The Bills were getting creative in the red zone. They were, running quarterback power. Josh Allen goes for 90 yards rushing. The Jets are going to see that. The Bills need to win. Yeah. They need to win this game. The home game is important enough. Luckily, they have the fallback to know the Bills do play well on the road, and that if something goes south here, the Patriots could lose to Miami, which they traditionally have, or we go on the road to New England and life is still alive. So, it's going to be interesting, but I will say, as funny as it sounds, it's not going to catch them. They're not going to catch them off guard. They're not going to sleepwalk. They're home in front of their fans to be a lot to prove, and to hold up banners and whatever else. It doesn't really matter, but it does to these guys that work all season, to be able to do this in front of the fans. And it is going to be a hostile environment for a week 18 game. That doesn't matter for the Jets. It's going to be a pretty hostile environment of you're right. Zach Wilson's going to have to play in front of a pretty raucous crowd, pretty raucous environment, the weather elements. And I want to see him. I'm scared if he shows up and plays good. That's great news for you guys long-term, because this is how it's going to be in the division. And if he plays well as a rookie, this is what Patriots fans have built their whole season yelling at us about, like how good Mac Jones is. If Zach Wilson does it though, and it competes and they only lose by 7, I don't know I'll be happy the Bills won, but I long term, I'm like, all right, like they got something going down there.
Well, I think he's shown enough to this point where no matter what happens on Sunday, we've seen enough like progress and talent to say, okay, listen, we have a glimmer of hope here. Like it's step 1, but he passed step 1. Now going from step 1 to the next, from year 1 to year 2, you expect a lot more because, it's the progression. You can't keep, like you saw with Josh Allen. Josh Allen step by step got better, cleaned up the turnovers, did a lot, better decision with the ball. You got to see from Zach next year. But I think even going into this game, even if Zach has a clunker, he's had 4 games in a row, no interceptions. Say he throws 2 on Sunday. I'm not like, oh my God, this kid's a bust. He's terrible. We've seen enough. We've seen the potential of the offense. We've seen the playmakers. It's just, I think they're walking into a very, very tough spot. And I hate saying it. I'm just being honest, because I just know, how this team is on the road, what the Bills need, all the conditions, and they're still a young team trying to find a way. They're trying to learn how to win still. They're still identifying themselves, and they have some unfortunate injuries. Like, you wish you had Elijah Moore playing. You wish you had George Fant playing. You wish you had more guys playing, but that's not the NFL, and injuries are all over the place. So it's a tough spot, man. It is, and we'll see. I don't have
the Bills wish every day they have Trey White going into passing offenses here soon. Like he could be the difference in shutting down KC again and not. Absolutely, we feel the pain there, and he's been very vocal and active for the community, and that's been awesome. He's been in the room with a torn ACL, working with his cornerback room, and the Bills have been obviously still really strong in the defensive backfield. Some great safety play. So with all that being said, I think it's going to be an interesting game. Vegas set it at 17 because once again, 10 wins by 12 plus points. The only team that actually has gotten to that under the 17 number is New England, 12-point loss, or the Bills lose 1 possession. So really, if they set the line at 4 or 5, the Bills would it'd be no different, because either the Bills are going to lose in a one score, or they're going to win by 15, 16, 17 points. So Vegas is like, what do we do here? Like they're going to lose and they're not going to cover anyways, or we need to set the line high enough because they keep covering at 12 and 13 and 14. And that's the Jets just got that brunt of, like, to me, it should be a 10-point spread. But the Jets got the brunt of the Bills are covering 10. Like they're covering everybody against 10, New England against 10. Like they're moving it to a level 17 where they want the job. I mean, they want to make money. I mean,
of course,
they probably think there's a potential they cover, especially with the elements. 17 points is a lot. The Bills didn't cover by half a point against the Falcons because of the weather. They keep setting it at 15, 16, the Bills keep covering, keep getting 14, 15, these numbers on the border. And that's what they do with this Jets game. They're worried that the Jets come and lay down, honestly. And I don't see it. Like, I think that they have enough to play for. Zach Wilson has enough. If this was Mike White or someone that doesn't really have a future, Flacco, or a different team, like even Cam Newton or something, I would tend to agree that I don't think there's anything here. But Zach Wilson has some stuff to show, some stuff to prove. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting game. I think it is. I don't think it's just going to be a 50-point blowout. Could be wrong. Right. But Ty, we really appreciate you coming on here and giving us everything. Give us a final score prediction.
I hate doing
this.
Give
us a number. We make you do it every time.
I'd say 24-10 Bills, and hopefully it's a game going into the fourth quarter.
You got to cover him.
I have a cover. I just think of the weather, man. I think both teams are going to try to run the football a lot. That's going to be because you can't throw the ball in the wind or you struggle with the passing game. You run the ball, the clock's going to keep moving. So 24-10. I'm just hoping it's a game in the fourth quarter where it's like at least we're all saying, hey, man, a couple plays here and there. It's going to be, like you're at least have a chance to make a run at it. But and I'd be happy with that. I'd be completely cool with a close loss and just move on. And I think Zach Wilson also is going to have something to play for after these bozos criticizing his character and stuff like that. So he's going to have a little chip on his shoulder with that too. But I just think the Bills are a better team, better coach, more talent. And the
Bills aren't probably happy about that. Like, they're probably like, come on, guy. Like, could you have waited a week to do that kind of stuff? Like, we don't need that. We don't need to give extra motivations to players as the media did to our safety duo, who's one of the best safety duos in the league. They're like, are you guys embarrassed? And they're like, they didn't do anything but run the ball and beside one 70-yard touchdown run.
Terrible. Yeah, that was
like, they weren't that good. Like, we just couldn't move the ball. Like, it's you play in the 55. You can't even drive in it. You think you're gonna play football in this?
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
That's where we're at now from. I think they'll do. I mean, you tell me if the Jets will run reverses, but I mean,
they do all kinds of reverses and motions.
Sure, they absolutely have to do that.
But they do a lot of trick plays, the wide receiver throwing the ball and everything else. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully it's competitive and listen, I respect Bills fans, and the cool thing is if you guys won, the environment's gonna be great. You can celebrate the division at home. It's like Jet fans respect Bills fans, man, because you guys are ahead in the rebuild. Much. We want to do what you guys did, kind of the same kind of projection up. So
yeah. Well, appreciate you coming on, and same thing. I cross over with Jets fans all the time. I'm big time Yankees fan. So up here we really are fairly. Mike can attest to this. We are generally. So we played. Horrible. So the Blue Jays played in Buffalo. Everyone knows this, and there was 99% Yankees fans.
Is this
99% Yankees fans in Buffalo and Rochester of Yankees fandom at the stadiums when they played the series?
I was one of the Blue Jays fans at the games.
There you go. But so I cross over with Yankees fans. When I go to the Bronx, non-COVID, I run into Jets fans. Jets fans galore down there. So it's a crossover. So we feel good. And Ephraim wants your autograph, man. You got to give him you got to send him an autograph at the end of the year. Now that this is week 18, everything's done.
He's a great man. He calls it all the time in our show, and he's like a salary cap guy, salary cap and draft guy. He knows all this stuff. So
Rob's threatening me. Rob, what did I do to you, Rob? I just said the Bills are playing for the division for the first time at home for the first time in 30 years.
We need Rob to just focus on UB.
Yeah, seriously. That's true. That's right, Rob. You are a Jets fan. I forgot about that. So someone we cover the UB with is a Jets fan. So
there you
go. There it is. So there is some Jets come to UB, University of Buffalo, from Long Island, from the city.
Nice.
We had a pretty high contingency. I had lots of friends from Long Island randomly. So there is some crossover there. So there is always a great week 18, week 17 Bills Jets game where all your friends from college go to it in Orchard Park. It's a great time. Ty, thank you so much for coming on. This episode's been brought to you by Picasso's Pizzas, Boneless Wings, and Outlet Liquors. Great show as always. We'll bring you on in the offseason. We'll get Ephraim in here with you to talk your cap and your draft at some point in April or something. And we'll keep an eye on the division as we always do, but really appreciate you, Ty, for coming on. And that's a wrap until pregame here from the Crowd Assist podcast. Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt, Ty, tell the Bills fans where they can find you you do have some great Jets content.
Talk Jets Radio on YouTube, at Talk Jets Radio, Instagram and Twitter. And we're just, we stream a lot, man. And our community, we have a little community. Our chat's always busy, and we appreciate all our followers, man. This has been pretty wild. So we're on YouTube. We're on there all the time. So let's talk Jets Radio and have some fun with us.
That's a wrap from the Crowd Assist podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. As always, a great episode. We'll be back at you shortly. But for now, that's a good night now.